reverting back to the future for children, I know education is one of your bigger platforms that you're focusing on during this campaign and in general. Would you like to expand a little bit more on the situation that has been unfolding here in the state of Washington and what the basically people are doing from a grassroots level upcoming here this week about the situation? Go ahead and break it down and let people know from the 101 perspective what they need to know about what's happening and what everyone is doing about it.
Well, we've got a significant issue here. We've got a crisis with our education system. We currently spend $14,000 federal, state, and local educating each child per year, and 1 out of 4 kids doesn't graduate. I mean, in any other industry, that'd be malpractice. And even more than that, a lot of those kids, they're pretty much only equipped to go to college and take on student debt. So we need, we have some significant problems with our education system. And I think one of the biggest issues, and kind of goes back to the crony capitalism conversation, is that we have an education monopoly. I mean, a good portion of our money is going to curriculum and textbooks and so on and so forth. But we have stifled creativity. We have no privatization. I mean, we have a government bureaucracy controlling our education system. And we have the Washington State Education Association, who's supposedly looking out for the interests of teachers, which I would argue not necessarily, who is leveraging our legislature right now through the Washington State Supreme Court to come up with more money to dump into a broken, outdated system. McCleary, basically in our Washington State Constitution, the paramount duty of the state is to provide ample provision for ample provision education. I'm butchering the actual statute. I don't have it in front of me, but basically provide ample provision for every child in the state without discretion to race, creed, religion, color, no discrimination. Now, the Washington Supreme Court has determined that what that meant was funding, and they pretty much narrowed it down and interpreted that it means more money. We need more money in the system. I don't necessarily agree with the Washington State Supreme Court opinion. I think that just my rudimentary understanding of working in the legal profession, I kind of understand that things can be interpreted in a variety of ways. And as I said earlier, he who has the most money wins. And there's significant political pressure to find in favor of the WEA. And so, the Washington State Supreme Court basically says, hey, the legislature needs to find more money somewhere, somehow, to amply fund education, or adequately fund, education. Now, when I think about ample provision, I think I like, I'm a mom, I like to use analogies. I think about my family, ample provision for my kids. What might that mean? Does it necessarily mean that I have a blank check and I can just spend money, however, and provide my kids with, whatever they want? No. Ample provision means that I provide amply, but within the parameters of my income and, whatever barriers or whatever environment, I might have there. I translate that to education, and for me, as I think about what the intent of the statute might have been and when it was written, I don't think the framers were thinking blank check. I think they were thinking don't discriminate. Because that's a sentence structure. They, later on in the sentence, and not only that, but we've got an interesting situation where basically the the Supreme Court is beating the legislature with a stick, saying you need to come up with more money, or we're sanctioning you $100,000 a day. Now, you'll see the articles. I like to clip I've got tons of these articles, Seattle Times, Herald, where they're saying that the state is being fined $100,000 a day. Let's be clear who the state is. Taxpayers are being fined $100,000 a day until we come up with the money to fully fund education, and we're not even sure what fully fund education means at this point. So that's what the hearing is about. The Supreme Court has a hearing. They're going to hear arguments from both sides, whether or not the legislature has in fact complied with the order to fully fund. I was talking to a legislator just this week who told me in the last 2 years we've increased educational funding by 36%. Don't quote me on that stat, but it was right around 34 or 36%. So we are increasing funding for education. But I don't like the idea that the Supreme Court or the WEA through the Supreme Court is holding teachers, students, and taxpayers hostage. Basically pay up or else. They're also this hearing on the long side. Potentially, the Supreme Court could order our schools shut down. I disagree with this scenario, and actually, we may have a constitutional crisis here too, because you've got the legislature and the Supreme, who has the authority here, and the Supreme Court, in effect, is sort of legislating from the bench, telling the legislature how it's going to be. So it's a significant issue. I'm not sure what the resolution's going to be, but I would hope that out of all of this, perhaps we can change the conversation. Perhaps this will be sort of an impetus to change the conversation and talk about education reform. Like I said earlier, we got an 1830 style desks in a row education model, and my 8-year-old can run an iPhone better than I can. We've got Google, Microsoft, Boeing, Amazon, all these tech companies, and we need to be educating kids for the future here. I would love to see a Google high school, but we have this monopoly that's controlling, and it's stifling creativity, it's stifling efficiency. I think about $14,000 federal, state, and local. I would, and this, I'm not saying what I'm going to say now is going to happen right away. Things happen very slowly. But I want to change the conversation. I would like to see a day where, that $14,000, or let's back up a minute, let's say $7,000, half of that money went to a voucher system, and that child, the family, could go to charter, public, maybe homeschool, or public, private, charter, or maybe homeschool. And in that scenario, I'd like to see the day a teacher, a really passionate, awesome teacher, which there's a lot of them, but they're being stifled right now because of the system. They don't have the resources and, to do what they really want to do. Their hands are tied. But that really awesome teacher takes that, $14,000 or, $7,000 in that scenario. $14,000 for 25 kids calculates out to about $315,000. That teacher could take, give every kid their own computer and take them around the world for that price, With the $7,000 model that I was telling you about, let's say you had $7,000 went to a voucher so they could go to charter, public, homeschool, whatever. $7,000 stays in the public school system. Think about that. The class size problem is solved because the kids go into a public school or whatever, but a private school, but the public school's keeping $7,000. And the public school wants that other 7,000 because that's what competition does for you. So they're going to become more efficient, more innovative, and we're going to see a lot more creativity come about. I'd like to see the day where we had schools that were geared in different directions. Let's say you had a child that hit 10th grade and, they don't really want to go to college. Maybe they want to enter a trade. Maybe they want to become a beautician. Maybe like my son, plumbers. He's in a plumber's apprenticeship. But at 10th grade, he wanted out of school. He was tired and, tired of school. He was sick of it. I had to push him to get him to graduate. The only reason he probably graduated was because of football. But imagine at 10th grade, if that 10th grader had the option of shooting off over here and going to a school that, maybe they're teaching robotics, or maybe, I don't know what it would be, but, they would have that opportunity, and instead of getting a high school diploma, which be worth flipping burgers, they have a degree, and maybe they've served in an apprenticeship or an internship where they're very equipped now for the workforce. Now, does that mean that they will never go to college? No. Maybe 5 years later, they decide, hey, I want to go back to college. Well, now they've been making money for 5 years and they can afford to go to college. They don't have to sign on to the debt. So, there's a lot of different scenarios that I can think of. And I don't have all the answers. As a representative, I don't think it's my role to have all the answers. I think it's my role to understand and be aware of what the problems are as my constituents make me aware and as I observe. And then my role is to bring stakeholders to the table, so to speak, from the various viewpoints, from the left, from the right, from the left, different ideas, and to facilitate that conversation. And the answer to every one of our problems should not be increased taxes. I believe that there are legislators right now that are using transportation, education, and homelessness to leverage taxes. My opponent, for example, in her legislative newsletter, used the word invest 3 times. Invest in this, invest in that, invest in this. Let's be mindful of the fact of what they're investing. They're investing our hard-earned money. I would rather have us privatize, break up the transportation monopoly, break up the education monopoly that I just talked about, and keep that money here locally and privatize, and so we have more disposable income.